Hello everybody and welcome to our Discovery Workshop with WWF. We're delighted that you've been able to join us today. This session will last around 1 hour and will include a panel discussion before moving on to the student Q&A. Questions for our panel can be submitted via the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen, and this will be open throughout the session. So I'm going to hand over to Matt to lead the panel discussion.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you to Speakers for Schools for hosting us today as part of Green Skills Week. My name is Matt Larson-Daw and I'm the Head of Education at WWF-UK. And WWF is the world's leading conservation organisation. We have a global network working for a future where people and nature can thrive together. And I'm really excited today to be with you, able to present a really inspiring panel of speakers. They come from all sorts of sectors, and that's really what I want you to take away from this webinar today. They all have sustainability as their guiding star, and they're going to explain a little bit about what that's meant for them and how they've brought that into practice in their career pathway. And I think what's really important to take away from today is that when we think about green skills and green jobs, we aren't just talking about a small selection of jobs that have been created because of the climate crisis. I think in policy and in the media, sometimes we hear about green jobs and we imagine we're talking just about renewable energy, maybe talking about retrofitting buildings so that they are more sustainable, so new technologies being brought in, and maybe thinking about conservation, undoing the damage that we've caused. But in fact, when we talk about sustainable careers, which is what we like to use at WWF, then we're thinking not just about the problems that need solving with some of these jobs, but actually about the underpinning reasons why we have problems in the first place and what the future could look like. And the underpinning problems, the causes of the climate crisis and the causes of other crises in the environment, such as the loss of nature and plastics in the ocean, it all comes down to one principle, and that is sustainability. We haven't been living sustainably, and business hasn't been helping us to do that. So we've been living in a way that takes more from the planet than the planet is able to recover, and we know that that needs to change. So that means not just looking at the problems we've caused over the last 100 years and thinking of new solutions to fix them or taking away the things that we can see are causing the most damage. It means thinking about the way that we live and the way that we work differently. And so hopefully over the course of this webinar, you'll see some of the variety of ways that you can take that as an inspiration into your choices as you look forward to training, further study, apprenticeships and careers. So without further ado, I'm going to start introducing the speakers and I'm going to let them give you some background to their journey and their experience themselves. So without further ado, I'm going to pass straight over to our first speaker, Kalkadan.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kalkadan Legessa. I am a social entrepreneur who specialises in sustainable fashion and really the power of the fashion industry to create fair, equitable, safe and creative and joyful work. My career started during an internship in Ethiopia. I was living with my grandma and my cousins for a period of about 7 months, working for one of the world's largest NGOs, aiming to create income generating opportunities for women in rural communities. What I saw was the challenge of driving new industry and new economy when it comes to income generating activities. In my free time, I used to go shopping and I would go to markets in beautiful hilltop settings and see what I could find. And one of the things that kind of blew me away most was the reality of just this incredible level of skill and craftsmanship in Ethiopia. And just to give you context, I came to the UK at 5 years old as an asylum seeker, and I grew up here with this kind of social understanding that countries like Ethiopia don't have much to offer, and potentially, are in need of a lot of change driven by our standards, our approach to our businesses and our charities here. What I saw in those markets was something I'd never seen before, and which is essentially how garments are made. So just like the stories you hear of people or children in London who might not know exactly where milk is from, before I saw people weaving fabric from cotton spools, never in my life had I imagined how it's actually constructed. What was really special about these markets is that you would see a shop selling products, and just behind that shop would be a seamster making garments, and just behind the seamster would be a weaver weaving fabric, and just behind the weaver would be a spinner spinning fabric. And it was really clear that everybody in the supply chain was paid markedly above the market rate for labour in the country. And that sparked my curiosity as to how jobs can be both fruitful, creative, based on skills and value, and also very sustainable. Like the entire technological processes being used to make garments in that region were fully reliant on manpower. So it would be things like bark and mud homes with traditional timber looms dug into the ground, and weavers sat producing incredible material, but with very little kind of energy usage or very little reliance on wider infrastructure. And what that meant is that you could take this type of model and take it to rural communities and train people how to weave and how to produce garments. And crucially, you could take those items, sell them in global markets, and help those people earn 4 or 5 times kind of the national target wage. And that's what really sparked my interest in both sustainable business models, but also importantly, equitable business models, and particularly the fashion industry. Now, the fashion industry spans the entire globe. It employs 73 million people, most of which are women, most of which are paid far below the required wage that they would need to have any sort of stability of life. And unfortunately, it relies on the exploitation of so many workers, but also it relies on a model of business that overproduces and underutilises garments to the extent that in the UK alone, we send 350 tonnes worth of clothing into landfill each year. And because of that, the industry is unsustainable. Like coming back to what Matt said, for our economies to be sustainable, it's really important that we use an appropriate amount of resources that we can take and then replenish back into the planet in a sustainable way. And it's also important that there is a minimum living condition for workers throughout the globe who aren't being exploited for us to be able to create new work. So essentially, I've dedicated my life to understanding how we get that circular economy within the fashion industry, which eventually led me to creating Only. Only is a tool that businesses can use to manage the lifespan of products. And currently, going back to saying we send 350 tonnes of clothing into landfill each year, currently we don't know who's responsible for that. We can't track it to the specific brand, or the specific type of product, the specific year of sale. There's no data that helps us to really understand why those things were discarded and how we can prevent that in the future. Only infrastructure gives brands a way to manage the lifespan of their products, whether it's through resale, repair, or recycling, and that's what I'm currently doing. And my career has seen the kind of transformation through many different job roles, so starting from NGOs, moving to fashion design, moving to export, importing, to retailing, and now eventually to climate tech. And I think the key kind of core skills that underlined all of those steps in my journey were systems thinking, communication, and an entrepreneurial mindset. These skills are non-technical, so for anybody thinking about working in sustainability with perhaps more of a creative mind or creative passions, I think there's so much opportunity to explore how we transform our economy, how we transform our culture, and the core skills I think that help deliver that into action fall down to an ability to see the wider picture, communicate that to your community, and think about how you can problem solve to create the solutions that can work and scale. So thank you, that's my brief overview.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Kalkadan. And two really important themes already raised that I think will come out a little bit more with the other speakers and as we discuss some of these issues. One, of course, being, as Kalkadan said towards the end there, understanding the whole system that's at work is really important to understand how your role in it and how the way a sector works is or is not sustainable. So that's a really important skill set. And then the other, of course, that's come out from Kalkadan's example is that we shouldn't just be thinking about the planet. If we're talking about sustainability, as any of you who have studied the Sustainable Development Goals at school will know, has to be thinking about people as well as planet and society, because if that's not sustainable, then we are unable to live in a sustainable way, and we can't build those systems in a way that looks after the planet, and it's not a future that we would want where some people are exploited. So that's really helpful. And Kalkan, I just wanted to follow up very quickly on one thing, which is I know one of your well, sort of your newest venture, Oni, involves actually helping companies to transition. And I wondered if you could just say a little bit about what that actually involves and what a company might be able to do with you through that initiative.
Definitely. So I think the fundamental challenge that most fashion brands and really any consumer brands or retailers face is that they're tied to a linear model of business where essentially they need to produce new products and sell those products in order to maintain their revenues, let alone grow their revenues. And this means that they become very efficient at producing more resources, more products, despite the kind of level of extraction of resources that they're partaking in. What Only does is through a very simple turnkey tool that integrates with their point of sale or e-commerce stores, is it provides them with the infrastructure, and this is digital infrastructure they need to launch resale marketplaces as part of their platform, and in doing so they can begin to monetize the secondary market for their products. It enables them to launch repair facilities on their products, which allows them to monetize the extension of use of products, and it allows them to offer recycling facilities on their items, which allows them to recover items and potentially return them back to their kind of raw goods, so that those raw goods could then be used to produce their next line of item. And essentially what it does is it makes it very easy for brands to begin to understand and then manage and monetize the lifespan of their products, and gives them a financial incentive to do so, because it's through that incentive that they can begin to drive the level of resources that are required for us to see the circular economy scale at the pace it needs to for us to meet our climate goals. So that's the long answer. The simple answer is that it's an app. So yeah, like if there are any brands watching this, or anyone has any connection to any retailers or brands, yeah, please do get in touch.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm sure the circular economy will come up a few times today. And I think some of the principles that we talk about, some of the big issues that we face, is actually making them make business sense, because otherwise there's real resistance to putting them in place. And the circular economy we learn about, and we kind of can see the value of it, and we can see that it's important, and yet it sometimes just doesn't seem to happen. And so I think it's fantastic to have initiatives like yours, and Steve's going to talk about another a little bit later, that actually make these into things that work and things that make sense for businesses. Okay, so I'm going to pass straight on to our next speaker. Thank you, Kalkadan. And this is Simon from Stephen George and Partners. Over to you, Simon. And I think you're going to share some slides.
Yeah, thanks very much, Matt. Okay, so as Matt says, I'm Simon Matthews. I currently work as an architectural technician, but what I thought might be a nice starting point was to give you a little bit of background, briefly anyway, about my career path, which has been somewhat different to most people's, in that I've done quite a number of different jobs over my 35 or so years of working life so far. So as I said, I followed a slightly different career path. I won't go through every job or every career I've followed, but when I left university, I worked as a quality manager and also in training for probably about 10 or 12 years. Didn't, to be fair, at that point have a lot to do with sustainability. But then I've always had an interest in design, and I set up my own garden design business. And at that point started to just become aware of the importance of sustainability on a very local level, to be fair, but it just started to become an issue. Later on in life, as I said, it's quite a different career path. I ran a coffee shop, bistro and restaurant for a period of 6 years in a local town, Market Harbour, to where I live. And at that point, I think my own interest in sustainability and its importance to us as a society and as a planet started to become more important. And we got involved in an organisation called Sustainable Harbour, which was very much about supporting local food producers. And certainly in our coffee shop and our delicatessen, we tried to stock and understand local producers, so that we weren't importing food from a great distance. And moving on from there, you'll be pleased to hear I finally ended up doing the job that I actually wanted to do when I was about 14 at school, but was told I probably couldn't because I wasn't very good at drawing. But it's never too late, and I eventually got a job working at Stephen George & Partners, a firm of architects. And it's whilst I've been working here that I've become aware of the opportunities, certainly, to have a huge impact on sustainability in architecture. Probably about 2 to 3 years ago, I just had an epiphany moment, and I realised I have got to do whatever I can to try and improve the sustainability of the planet and to impact on climate change. And I started, as anyone who's passionate about it, thinking, well, what can I do as an individual? And I started to measure my own carbon emissions and have successfully reduced them, I think, by sort of 30 to 40% from where I was 2 or 3 years ago. And that's great, but the most opportunity I've got now is to take another 7 tons of carbon out of the atmosphere per year. And then I thought, well, I work for a company. Have I got an opportunity to have an influence just at the practice where I work? And actually, we measure our carbon emissions each year. And as a company, just in our Leicester office, we produce about 60 tons of CO2. So now I'm starting to think, okay, if I talk to my colleagues, if I can persuade them and engage with them around sustainability, there's a really good chance to move things forward. But then I quickly became aware of the impact I've got actually working in an architectural practice, so the job that we do. And in my sector alone, which is residential, we design houses and residential developments. And the houses that we design and the layouts we design each year are responsible for somewhere around about 750 tons of carbon a year. So all of a sudden, I now have an influence over 100 times the level of emissions that I do personally. And as I got into this more and more, I realized that actually there's even bigger opportunities. And when I've looked into it, the architectural sector and the built environment is responsible for around about 40% of global CO2 emissions. And just in our practice, if I include embodied carbon, the carbon that goes into constructing all the buildings that we design each year, we're now up around over 25,000 tons of CO2 per year that I have some influence over. And now I'm starting to realize I just have this huge opportunity to impact on the sustainability of the planet. So as a result of that, I've had the chance to lead a lot of sustainability work at Stephen George. And one of the initiatives we've got, just to share with you briefly, is a program called Better Buildings, where we aim to engage with older primary school children, so slightly younger than those of you on the call, but sort of age 10 and 11. And we've produced a website and a program called Better Buildings. But rather than me introduce it, let me get my avatar to explain what it's all about.
Hello,
We're really pleased you've chosen to take part in our Better Buildings project. My name's Simon and I work for a company of architects called SGP. We design buildings, lots of different ones. And like you, we really care about the environment.
Hi, I'm Jay, and along with Simon and my other colleagues, and your teachers too, we're going to show you how to try and design buildings that are kind to the environment. And at the end, you'll have the chance to design your own building. So let's get going.
So that's the brief introductory video to the website, and basically what we aim to do when we go into schools, but schools can work with this directly as well, is to talk through maybe the more traditional approach to building materials using things like steel and concrete, and then introducing some more modern alternatives, things like glulam and recycled plastic, but also some really old building materials like rammed earth, which has been used for well over 6,000 or 7,000 years to construct buildings across the planet. And then to give the children a chance to design their own low carbon building. And certainly our initial feedback has been absolutely amazing. The ideas that people in primary school, but also when we've engaged with older children as well, the ideas they come up and the way that they've grasped it, I have every faith that in the future we will tackle the climate emergency that we find ourselves in today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Simon, and really fantastic to know that the career you've ended up with in at the moment was one that you wanted to do so long ago, but that you've had the opportunity to take these different approaches along the way. And as you'll see, as we go through the selection of speakers on the panel today, you'll see we're covering off some areas of society, some areas of business and life that are relevant to all of us. So architecture, of course, is defining the buildings around us and the way that our cities are planned out and the materials that are used. We have food, we have fashion, we have the IT equipment that we all use every day represented on this panel. So this is where these kinds of things that we have influence over can actually be areas that will change life and the way we live for everyone in society. So huge amounts of potential there. Now, I had a quick follow-up question for you, Simon, which was specifically on your area of expertise around better buildings. What do you feel? So I've got my background today is a unfortunately computer generated theoretical city of the future, just one idea of what it might look like that was created for WWF Sustainable Futures project. But I was interested to hear from you. What do you feel is the biggest challenge that might need to be overcome for us to be living in sustainable cities in the future?
I think it's a great question, Matt. There are actually a huge number of challenges, but if I had to pick one, or at least the sort of best challenge to overcome at this stage, it's measuring the impact of what we're doing. So we do hear about individual carbon emissions, and I shared on my slides the measurement of mine, which is somewhere around sort of 7 to 10 tons of CO2 emissions per person per year in the UK. But when it comes to the things that are immediately beyond our control, I'm not sure we really have great measurements. I would, for my sector in architecture, I've got an idea of how much a house embodied carbon, how much carbon emissions come from a house. But as you start to get to larger scales, sort of big buildings, industrial complexes, it gets very difficult to measure. And to be honest, most of us don't know those figures. I know how much things cost in pounds or euros or whatever currency you're looking at, but I don't know the CO2 impact. So if we could come up with a way of, that we hear about a project is costing 150 million pounds, as if that's a great thing to do. Well, how much carbon is being emitted as a result of that project? That would be a huge help to us to understand what we really need to change and do differently.
Thank you, Simon. And yeah, really interesting. We know that we have targets that we have to meet for our survival and for the future of our planet, but we need to know that we're meeting them. Otherwise, we can't be sure that we are. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to pass straight on now to Ty from Zero Carbon Farms. Over to you, Ty.
Thanks, Matt and WWF for hosting this fantastic event. Let me just start by saying, when I was at school, we didn't discuss climate change in the way we're doing now, and there was little understanding of the word sustainability, which everyone seems to use these days. And so I'm really pleased to get a chance to tell you a little about what I do and where I work. So before that, I think I should explain what sustainability actually means to me and how I got here. And I think that's very important, because for me, sustainability is about meeting the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generation like yourself to meet their own needs. As a company, this means operating responsibly, transparently, and being accountable for our action and the consequences in the way we produce, market, and source good. As Matt said, I am the technical and sustainability manager for a company called Zero Carbon Farm, and we are an agricultural technology business which runs in a controlled environment farm, 33 meters underground beneath Clapham High Street in South London. Our farm, which grows microgreens and baby leaves salads, is built in an old World War II air raid shelter underneath the Northern Line. So when we're downstairs in the farm, you can actually hear the train overhead every few seconds. And for me, what makes us a Zero Carbon Farm sustainable is that firstly, we are a B Corp business, and we're also carbon negative business, and which means we calculate our carbon emission each year. And one of the things that also sets us apart is that we use 100% renewable energy, which have a zero carbon footprint in terms of the power we use to run our farm, but also we offset more carbon than we actually produce as a business. Beyond that, we grow without using any soil. So instead, we sow our seed on recycled carpets from John Lewis. We also use 70% less water to grow our crops than traditional method of growing. More importantly, we use a fraction of the space that regular farming or traditional farming will use. Every meter square of our farm is significantly more productive than traditional farmland, which means we can actually grow more food in less space. And our control environment farm means that we do not have to use pesticide or any other harmful chemical that can result in soil degradation to protect our crop. It also means that we do not have to worry about the weather, as we can control the light, the temperature level to ensure that every day is a perfect growing days. And I think this is really important because of the effects climate change is having on the weather at the moment and the produce, like in terms of traditional farming. As a population pressure and climate change have become a major concern. The beauty of zero carbon farming is that we can grow more in less space and operating in a dense urban area, which is in turn reduces our food mileage and also our carbon footprint. And we work in like a circular economy system. So a bit about myself. I joined Zero Carbon Farm 3 years ago, and I'm responsible for all our work related to sustainability, so managing our carbon reduction plan, organizing offsetting projects such as tree planting, looking for eco-friendly way of us delivering our produce to our customers. For example, we started using an electric e-cargo bike for all our local deliveries, and we're also looking at other systems that we can use in the future. I'm also constantly exploring different ways we can improve what we already do, like trying to reduce our use of plastic even further than we currently do, and making sure that the companies that we supply to or that supplies to us shares our value and are as concerned about the planet as we are. So in terms of my career journey, again, my journey has changed over the years. When I was at school, sustainability was just a buzzword, and I didn't think a career acting as a steward of our planet was possible. I looked at my secondary school yearbook a couple of weeks ago. And in the section that asks, what will you be doing in 10 years time? I wrote, I'll be a famous chef like Gordon Ramsay. And boy, was I wrong. To fulfill my dream of actually becoming a renowned chef, I started working in 5-star hotels, Michelin star restaurant after leaving secondary school at the age of 16. After a few years working as a chef, after doing my training, I decided I wanted to do something that has more positive impact on the world and also helping people. So I decided to join the military, the British Army. And after completing my basic training, I got the chance to travel to different countries, helping them with things like disaster relief, etc. And after that, after a few years in the army, again, I decided actually food is my true love. So I decided to go back to uni and I studied nutrition, a degree in nutrition and food science at Reading University. Since then, I have worked in the food industry and I haven't looked back. However, a couple of years ago, halfway through my career, I realized that some of the ways we produce and source food currently is not sustainable. And that's what actually drove me towards working for Zero Carbon Farm, because I firmly believe that business can operate in a way that does not compromise the ability of future generation and to thrive on our planet. And that's why I opted for a career that has sustainability at its core, at its heart. And it's also the reason why I do what I do now. And I hope that I have given you a sense of what sustainability career is. It does not mean you actually have to work in a particular industry. You can change your mind all the way through there. You can explore different things, because if you look at me, I've always wanted to help the planet. But when I was your age, I didn't actually know what does that mean about helping the planet. And over the years, after working in different industries, I actually realized that the best way to help the planet is actually preserving the planet. And there's so many ways we can contribute to that. There's so many ways, like we've seen here today, there's fashion, and for me, food is the most important part of it, because if you look at a lot of publication that is written out in terms of planetary boundaries, if you watch a lot of David Attenborough's program, a lot of them you finish watching it and you become depressed, because even like in a couple of years, by 2040, David Attenborough is telling us we might not have enough farmland to be growing our produce, which means majority of us might actually go hungry. And that's why businesses like Zero Carbon Farm is coming into place. Like you can take an abandoned, a brownfield building and turn it into fresh produce to feed the human race. And also by doing this, we can actually also preserve the land and give the land back to the green pastures, to give the land back to actually to the planet and let wildlife grows on it and actually produce what they call carbon sinking projects, you know, like tree planting. And for me, and I think that's really key in terms of sustainability. So you don't actually have to start saying you're starting your life as becoming sustainability. You can walk through any aspect of it and you can pivot back to actually sustainability at the right time. And there's so many jobs out there that you can actually contribute into sustainability without you actually knowing that you're actually contributing into protecting the planet and helping the planet thrive. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ty. And as I put in the chat for you to take away afterwards, if you're struggling to picture what a farm in an air raid shelter that far underground might look like, do have a look at Zero Carbon Farm's website, and I believe you can even arrange to take a tour of the farm. And I think it's fantastic to have you know, food on the table for this panel, because it is one of the areas that has one of the biggest impacts on the climate crisis, but also the biodiversity loss crisis. And I think it's one of the examples where we can understand that we don't just need to be solving problems, we need to be thinking differently about how we do things, because we've needed food, you know, throughout the whole of our existence, and therefore our civilization has grown up around new ways to cultivate food and to grow more and to grow more variety of food, so that we can kind of have, you know, 7 billion humans all on the planet at the same time as we do now. But of course, until we come up against the boundaries of our planet, the limits of our resources, we haven't been prompted to innovate and to come up with different ways of thinking about how we produce food. We've just come up with more and more effective and efficient ways to produce more food quickly. And so I think now this work that's being done by Ty and her colleagues at Zero Carbon Farms, and lots of work in Amsterdam around kind of new ways of farming food, and innovations in the types of food that might be available to us. These are all, really, really important ways that we can all contribute to society kind of taking a shift and being different from how it has been over the last few years. So I had a follow-up question for you, Ty, which was, you mentioned that Zero Carbon Farms is a B Corporation, and I think this is a really, it's a new and I think very important concept that I think it would be great for the students to understand what that actually means in practice. Would you mind just elaborating on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, let me start by saying what B Corp stands for. B Corp is a non-profit organization, and actually the B Corp stands for Benefit Corporation, and these are a community of companies that have met the highest standard of social environmental performance through transparency and accountability. And for us, in terms of Zero Carbon Farm, why we decided to be B Corp is because we wanted to join a community that is committed to building a better world. That is one of the fundamental foundation of B Corp, is that you have to be committed to building a better world, and you have to put people and the planet first. And the only way you can do that is by being transparent in everything what you do, in terms of knowing how much carbon you're actually producing, knowing where you can actually, by knowing where what carbon you produce, you can actually find out which area most of your emission is coming from, and then you can look at ways you can innovate to actually reduce it, and also to put a system into place in terms of look at other innovation. Like for us in Zero Carbon Farm, our business, our most emission comes from our transport, and that was one of the reasons why we look at using electric bike to do with the local deliveries, and in the future we're looking at 100% renewable, 100% electric vans when it becomes available. Also, B Corp gives us a guide, and in terms of the commitments, in terms of working group, you get to work with other companies, you get to talk to other companies, understand what they're going through and what they're doing to combat some of these issues, and it just puts you into a community that you're not alone. There are more people that are trying to be putting the planet and also be as sustainable as possible. And for me, and also it makes us as a business review our values and our policy. We're not just for profit, and I think that's the biggest thing in terms of a lot of carbon work, is that as long as you're not for profit and you're putting the planet first in everything decision you make as a business, you will always be sustainable. And for us, that's what it means for us to be B Corp, and that's why we decided to be B Corp, because we want to always put the planet first, and every decision we want to be transparent with it.
Thank you so much, Ty. And these issues are so complicated. There's so many science-based questions to ask about a company to understand if they are truly sustainable. I think to have something like B Corp, which is like a brand, you can look for the logo and you can see in a company's description whether they are either trying to become a B Corp or they already are one. And you'll see, if you go to the B Corp website, there's a lot of new companies that are in the list of B Corporations, because of course, starting from scratch, you can put these principles in place right from the very beginning, as Zero Carbon Farms have. For a large company, like Amazon or a big bank or something like that, to try and move to become a B Corp is obviously a lot harder, because they have to kind of dismantle all of the ways that they've been working that have led to them being profitable and being big in the past. But it provides that aspiration. So the more that we kind of recognise and support and celebrate B Corps, I think the more it will become an expectation that the big companies that already exist should meet those same standards. So I think it's really good to see these pioneers. Okay, without further ado, we're going to pass on to Steve from Circular Computing. Over to you, Steve.
It looks like we have lost Steve.
Oh, no.
You might be trying to get back on. Maybe if we go to Kat first.
He was on right up until his slot as well. Yeah, so we'll pass over. Is that okay? Sorry, Kat, put you on the spot there. I'll pass over to Kat, and then hopefully we'll have Steve back before the end of the webinar. Over to you, Kat.
Great, thanks very much, Matt. Hi everyone, yeah, thanks very much for letting me speak today. I think it's brilliant that we're having this conversation, and I have to say I feel really inspired to hear from so many people that are just doing so many great things for the planet. As Matt says, I'm Kat, and I'm a lawyer in WWF's Advocacy and Campaigns department. So it's my job to provide legal advice, and I devise legal strategies to help further our advocacy and campaigns work. And that's predominantly to tackle the climate crisis and protect and restore nature. Just really interesting hearing what other people's career paths have been, and what Ty was saying about the guidance that we had at school, or what conversations we were having at school around what careers might be available to us. And I have to say, I don't feel like these conversations about sort of climate and sustainable careers were really a thing when I was at school. But I do remember having a really strong sense of wanting to do something positive with my career. And I was always interested in becoming a lawyer, partly because I had this vague and possibly slightly misguided notion at the time that becoming a lawyer would give me skills and knowledge to do something to tackle some of these big issues that I could see in the world around me, and in particular sort of issues around the environment and sustainability was quite a big one that was really important to me when I was a teenager. Despite that, when I left school, I actually went to do a psychology degree rather than a law degree, and I studied things like sort of social policy, psychology, and things like economic and environmental psychology, because I was quite interested in, you know, what motivates people to behave in a certain way. And I then, once I left university, I then did a law conversion and my legal practice course, and then I trained at a law firm. I qualified as a dispute resolution lawyer, which basically means that it was my job to take companies to court on behalf of other companies, which might not seem like the most obvious thing to go and do if you're interested in the environment, but really what that taught me was it gave me lots of skills and knowledge that then sort of helped me to get the job that I have now, which, as I was saying, is at WWF in the advocacy and campaigns team. I think it's important just to say that I think there are lots of ways as a professional, whether you're a lawyer or an accountant or a teacher or any of the other careers that we've talked about today, where you can actually kind of embed sustainability into your career. So obviously, speaking from the perspective of the lawyer, we have lots of skills around sort of drafting, whether it's to do with drafting contracts, whether you're advising on, you know, big banking transactions, whether you're a litigator like I was and still am to a certain extent. I think that you can kind of always be conscious of what we refer to as environmental, social and governance concepts. And I was actually at a conference just yesterday where there were lots of lawyers across lots of different practice areas all sitting in a room talking about, you know, there are these huge issues that are not going away, and, you know, we can talk about the science, we can talk about the fact that, you know, we really need to start turning things around on both climate and nature by 2030. And I think Matt alluded to quite a lot of that at the kind of the opening session today. And these are all things that lawyers really need to be clued up on, and they need to be advising their clients, because those are, you know, that's how we start to kind of see a shift, and we start to see, you know, companies really kind of taking some of these issues seriously. In terms of how I've sort of brought my kind of legal skills into, you know, what I do now, there are lots of ways in which I think being a lawyer can help facilitate that transition. So whether that's from the perspective of sort of drafting new laws, or whether it's from the perspective of kind of analysing what responsibilities businesses and government bodies have, and kind of really scrutinising the decisions that are being made and holding them to account, or whether it's on the other side, which is more sort of you know, taking them to court for doing bad things to the planet, whether that's kind of polluting or I think, you know, decisions around sort of opening a new runway, when we should be, you know, really trying to reduce our emissions in the way that Simon was talking about. So yeah, there's lots of different ways. And then of course, on the much broader scale as well, you need lawyers working sort of at the UN international level, really thinking about what our, you know, international commitments are under things like the Paris Agreement and some of those, and also the Convention on Biodiversity, and thinking about how do we as a sort of global community really work together to tackle these problems, and they're difficult problems to tackle. You definitely need lawyers at that level as well to be able to you know, to advise and to come up with the wording and come up with the kind of the agreements that should be made to make sure that happens, and that it happens quickly enough and effectively enough. I've probably been talking for too long, Matt, and I'm conscious we haven't got a huge amount of time, but yeah, so that's all from me for now.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Kat. And I've got a follow-up question for you in a moment, but before I do, just to highlight, I mean, obviously you've got two people on the call from WWF. You've got myself, who works leading our education work, and you have Kat, who is a lawyer. I think when you think about working for a conservation organisation, there is a kind of maybe an assumption you might make that it's all about either fundraising, perhaps, or campaign communications, or for the most part, it's people, scientists, naturalists, going out and working on the ground to protect landscapes and understand the wildlife needs and to solve those problems. Of course, that's a big part of what we do, but any big organisation needs all of these different skill sets. So I thought it was really important to bring Kat in to give you an element of how, you know, a set of skills and training opportunities that feels like it's taking you into a certain sector doesn't restrict you to that sector. You've got skills that then you can bring to bear on whatever sector, whatever mission is most important to you. And of course, right now we're talking about perhaps the most important mission of all, which is saving the planet. So with that in mind, Kat, I've got a follow-up question for you, which is just looking at your sort of career to date. It doesn't have to be while you're at WWF. Where have you felt most proud that you've used your legal skills to sort of bring benefits to that mission?
Thanks, Matt. That's a really big question. I feel like there are lots of different things. I mean, certainly most of the work that I have done at WWF, I would say probably falls into that category. But I would think the key example that springs to mind is actually having an opportunity to use those litigation skills that I had when I worked for a law firm, and bringing that and using that while I was at WWF working on our river pollution case which went to court in June last year. And that was just around, so looking at some 40 special areas of conservation. These are really precious habitats which were being polluted from agricultural sources, and the Environment Agency and DEFRA weren't doing enough to protect them. We took the government to court on that, and we had a sort of what I would describe as a mixed outcome. But the great thing about it is that just last week I found out that the government has put forward quite a lot more funding for the Environment Agency to really have more inspectors to go and kind of keep an eye on those sites and carry out the sort of the monitoring and enforcement that we desperately need to ensure that those special sites are protected. So that was definitely a proud moment for me, and I think a great example of how you can use skills from one part of your career and kind of use them in another part. So yeah, that's probably the main one. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much, Kat. And yeah, actually, when I was at school, sort of looking back at Simon's talk about wanting to be an architect since he was at school, I wanted to be a lawyer when I was at school, and obviously ended up going down a different path. But it was all about that idea that I'd have the power to fight for justice. And of course, right now, it's come full circle. I'm thinking, I wish I had those skills, because I see exactly what Kat's talked about with that freshwater case, where a lot of the time we have passionate activists and we have conservation organisations, from very small local ones all the way up to big ones like WWF, and they know what's needed, but they just don't have the know-how and the skills needed to kind of influence and change the system in the way that it needs to be changed. So we need people with all those different skill sets to be on our side and able to bring those skills into the fight. Okay, so we've got one more speaker, and then there'll be a little bit of time at the end to address any questions that have come in on the Q&A. So please do drop them in either for a specific speaker or just something to pose to the panel. And I'll pass over to our last speaker, who is Steve. Steve, could you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Haskew. I am the Director of Sustainability at a company called Circular Computing. Our mission is to change the way that the world buys and uses laptop technology. And to give that a little bit of background, there are about 250 million laptops made every year. And we live in a consumer society where we take, make, use and dispose of products. You'll have learned about that hopefully within your circular economy education. The things that go into making a laptop are really precious. So we take from the earth, of which there is only 100% of anything. So we take rare earth and raw minerals. It goes through a very complicated refining process, and out at the other end of the process comes a laptop, which we use for a couple of years, and then we have this sort of a refresh cycle based on a number of key external things that include a warranty from the manufacturer, sort of a hunger for more power, maybe from software applications that you feel you may need. And our job is to take product that people no longer have a use for, they've taken their value, to remanufacture those assets and to find a new user so that we can maintain that value within society. Because without so doing, we are going to run very short of the very things that we need. And that includes the components that need to drive the electric vehicle industry, the wind, hydro, and the power industry. They all need the same components that a laptop needs. So if everybody's plundering the earth for the same raw components, then simply there's just not enough to go around. So we need to think of innovative ideas and ways of keeping things alive. And we believe that the circular economy is core to achieving that. Additionally, we believe that the circular economy is key to a decarbonised future state. So if I said to you that to make a laptop, you generally will hear me say in society that to make one laptop will require 330 kilos of CO2 on the output end. So to frame that, 3 laptops in brand new state will kick out a ton of CO2. The difficulty with making that statement, of course, is what does a ton of CO2 look like? Because we're consumed with big numbers or little numbers. A ton of CO2 is equivalent to 19,000 cubic feet, and that will fill a 3-bedroom house. So if you're buying 3 laptops every 3 years for your house, then effectively what you're doing indirectly is setting off a 3-bedroom house worth of CO2 into the atmosphere. So we argue it is on the behaviour of the user as much as the producer to find a way to stop that event from happening. So what Ty was saying is right. Achieving the needs of today without compromising the future needs of those generations is fine. Having products that are green are fine, so long as you're not asking the next user to compromise on their use of that product, of course. And my job is to enable large users of IT, and we were really happy to welcome the WWF into our stable of clients. That align a way of thinking to our way of thinking. Where we have clients that or prospects that don't think the way that we do, it's generally a very difficult fit because they have a different agenda. So working with organisations that have a like mind to what sustainability means is key. So there's the carbon output. To make a laptop is 190,000 litres of water for one laptop. It's very thirsty in the mining, refining, production stages of making a laptop, which if you're living in the UK isn't a thing, but where water is the most valuable of resources, it really is a thing, and that's often where the component technology comes from, of course. And then there's the 1,200 kilos of rare earth and resources to actually make the product in the first place. So It's important that we think as consumers about our consumption habits, because unless we do, we are going to run out of things, or the divide, the inequality between those that can afford and those that can't afford will widen, and that's something that we're very keen to kind of narrow. Additionally, we invest into social programs as an organisation, so we have a reforestation drive. You know, we're close to 500,000 trees at the moment, which is great. It's about not just about the carbon, it's about what those investments do for people that look after our trees. So we employ villages and the like to look after our nurseries. So we try to do an end-to-end. We try to look after the people, planet, and the profit or the cost element as an organisation. And you know, I'm delighted to be on this call today. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. I had a sort of double follow-up question for you. One is I find it really helpful if you would just be able to give the students on the call a little insight into the kinds of jobs that a company like Circular Computing is sort of offering. So the kind of career options or job options that are available as a result of a company taking that approach. And then a slightly more cerebral question, if you could just reflect on it, which is in your view, is the sort of the ideal picture of the future one where there are more companies like Circular Computing that are kind of addressing this problem of overconsumption, or could you see a more fundamental change that means we don't need such companies in the future? So I'll just hand over to you for those two. Okay, so if I do that in reverse then, Matt, the circular economy will be easier where products are made so when we make a product, they have the circular economy in mind. So they have a reuse. They don't have a single use in mind. So if we make something that is made for reuse, then the circular economy and linearity that's where the bridge comes together. And on that basis, with what Simon was saying, is that design, architecture, the engineering part of society is a critical component for circularity to embed itself quickly. But in terms of the jobs that are available within an organisation like ours, we have engineering. We take products in, core products in. We have to disassemble it. We have to work out what the problems are, test those products, and then reassemble. So we have a whole production line that is not dissimilar to that of a brand new factory, but there's more towards problem solving within reverse logistics in the collection of core. If there's 6 people on this call, collecting 6 laptops, for instance, is a job in itself, and having that reverse logistics mechanism, protecting the assets that are in society, zeroing out waste, thinking about regenerative systems, requires energy and youth, and people that want to apply themselves, be useful. You might not have all of the questions, at least let alone have all of the answers, but make yourself available to wanting to learn, and organisations that are keen to adopt sustainability within their culture will absorb your energy. Thanks so much, Steve. So given that we're almost at time, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say one very quick closing remark. I'm going to bring a slide up for that. And then I'm going to come around each of the speakers in turn in the order that they've spoken and just ask for a 1-sentence response to this challenge, if you like, which is what big thing would you like to see different in the future? So it could be very much directly related to the work that you're doing and your own sort of, mission, but don't feel restricted by that, because obviously you're informed people coming from a variety of sectors. So just before I go around, I'm going to give them a little bit of thinking time, just by sort of reflecting on some of the things that we heard from all of the speakers, kind of built up over the course of that time. There's this idea of green jobs, which is these jobs aiming at changing the current system and introducing new technologies. But what you've hopefully learned is there are different paths into a sustainable career which is contributing to a sustainable future. So I thought it'd be useful to just reflect on a few of the different models that have come out of this panel. So the first is that you can choose a green job. You can look at working for sustainability through the work that you do, building up those skills, maybe STEM skills, that can enable you to be someone that monitors carbon or be someone that that works in a renewable energy company. However, that's not the only way. One way is to choose an employer. Think about where you're going to take your skills and your passion and your energy to contribute to helping a business. Business need new skills and new energy from those that are currently in school. They should earn it. they should be a company that you want to exist in the world to attract your passion. So looking to see whether an employer is working to ensure a sustainable future means maybe looking to see if they are a B corporation, but maybe just being equipped to recognize if what they're doing is truly sustainable. The third thing is that you can bring sustainable thinking into a company or sector and change it for the good of the planet. You can influence, Simon's words on this were really key. And I think just the fact that you can recognize there are issues with the sector doesn't mean that you shouldn't work in it if it's where your interests and your passions and your skills take you, but you can be a force for change within that sector. And then the final one is, of course, that we are in a transition. We're in a world where every aspect of society is going to have to shift and change and adapt to be sustainable, zero carbon, because we know that that's essential for our survival. That creates huge opportunities. If you understand what we need from business and what we need from the way that society works and the products that we have available to us, then that puts you in a position to be able to come up with new ideas like Calcadan and look at different kinds of industry like Ty and her colleagues at Zero Carbon Farms, and actually be a pioneer. There are huge opportunities to be an entrepreneur and to start up something new that you can see doesn't already exist. So I'm going to close there and go round and just hear one final word from each of the speakers on that prompt that I gave them, and then we'll be calling an end to the panel. So thanks very much for joining us today. And this recording will be available after, and I'll leave it with the words of our speakers, starting with Calcadan, unless, have we lost Calcadan?
Calcadan's had to hop off, but did give an answer.
The dangers of overrunning. Okay, well, that's fine. We'll hear from everyone else. So Simon, would you mind going first then?
Yeah, sure. Well, my big thing is way beyond architecture. I would like to see, whenever I make a purchase, be it online for a t-shirt or going to buy a new car or even a house or a building, how much does it cost me in pounds or euros, and how much does it cost me in carbon emissions? Is it a packet of biscuits maybe costs 80 pence and there's 3 kilograms of CO2 related to it? I can then make more informed decisions.
Fantastic, thank you, Simon. And we do have a response from Calcadan as well, submitted before she left, which was that the thing that she wanted to see different in the future is a huge transfer of economic value to the working poor. So a real shift in the power balance in society. When hopefully her talk really gave an indication of how that would contribute. Okay, over to you, Ty. Oh, we've got you muted at the moment, Ty, sorry. No, still muted, hang on. We'll come back to you, Ty, if that's all right. We just need you to check your settings there, and we'll hear from Kat.
Thanks, Matt. I have a really lawyery answer. Sorry. I would like to change the Companies Act and have a legal duty on directors of companies to make sure that their company looks after the planet, as well as answering to their shareholders. So that's the one thing that I would change if I could.
That does feel like it would be fundamental, wouldn't it? It would be really transformative. And Steve, and then we'll come back round to Ty.
I would say buy less and buy better.
Buy less and buy better. So yeah, and systems to support that. I guess we need those opportunities to do that. And then finally, last but not least, Ty, I can see you're unmuted now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I think Kat and Simon actually said something I'm really passionate about, and I think what I would now go for is actually agree with Kat, because I believe the world is so carbon intensive at the moment. Small businesses like ours can make a change, but in order to actually reduce our carbon footprint, big businesses need to make a change, and the only way they'll be able to do that, or they'll feel like it's a responsibility to do that, if the policy change. If there's a policy, the government writes a policy that every business have to put sustainability as its core, as is at the core of their letter of association, you know. So I think that's the biggest thing, about changing the policy and making big businesses start to look at what they're doing and changing the way they're currently sourcing or producing at the moment.
Thank you so much, and a huge thank you to all of our speakers today. Those closing remarks were very telling. We heard we need change in consumer behaviour, we need change in the responsibilities on businesses, we need change in policy, and we need those solutions, and we need a power shift to ensure that society is not just furthering the riches of billionaires. So some fundamental changes needed. We can all play our part in our choice of career and the way that we bring our skills into working life. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, and please do follow up and learn more about the different companies and individuals that you've met on this panel today. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you everyone, and thank you to Matt for hosting the panel as well. Thanks to everyone who tuned in, and we have shared a feedback form and we would really appreciate it if you could fill it out. But thanks everyone for joining, and have a great day.